From Republic to Empire. The growth of Rome from a republic to an empire took place over 500 years. The story can be divided into four major periods. The first period began in 509 BCE, when the Romans drove the last Etruscan kings out of power. At that time, Rome became a republic. The Romans wanted to protect their boundaries to gain more land. This led to a series of wars. During the next 245 years, the Romans fought one enemy after another. They conquered their Latin neighbors in central Italy. They also defeated their old masters, the Etruscans. Wisely, the Romans eventually made allies or friends of their former enemies. By 264, Rome and its allies controlled all of Italy. The second period of expansion. Rome's growth threatened another great power, the city of Carthage in northern Africa. During the second period of expansion, from 264 to 146 BC, Rome and Carthage fought three major wars. Through these wars, Rome gained control of North Africa, much of Spain, and the island of Sicily. Roman armies also conquered Macedonia, and Greece. The third period of expansion from 145 to 44 BCE, Rome came to rule the entire Mediterranean world. In the east, Rome took control of Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt. In the west, a general named Julius Caesar conquered much of Gaul. Proud Romans now called the Mediterranean our sea, but the Republic was in trouble. Civil wars divided the city. Roman generals were becoming dictators. They set their armies against the power of the Senate. Caesar himself ruled as a dictator before he was murdered in 44 BCE. The men who killed Caesar thought they were saving the power of the Senate. However, several more years of civil war followed. Then Caesar's nephew Octavian seized power. The Senate named him Augustus, or Honored One. Rome was now an empire governed by one supreme ruler. The fourth period of expansion. The fourth period of expansion began with the start of the empire. It lasted until 14 CE. The first emperor, Augustus, added a great deal of new territory by pushing the borders of the empire all the way to natural boundaries, like rivers, to make it easier to defend. Later emperors added more territory, and at its height, the Roman Empire stretched from the island of Britain in the west to the Black Sea in the east. Each period of expansion involved cost and sacrifice. The next four sections give you more details about each period of expansion. Rome's first period of expansion included more than 200 years of almost constant warfare, and during this time, Rome gradually took control of the entire Italian peninsula. After the last Etruscan king was overthrown in 509 BCE, the Romans began to expand their territory and influence. In 493 BCE, Roman leaders signed a treaty or agreement with their Latin neighbors in the south. The treaty said that there shall be peace between the Romans and the communities of Latins as long as heaven and earth endure. The new allies agreed to band together against their common enemies, and during the next 100 years, the Romans fought a number of wars against the Etruscans as well as against tribes living in hills in the areas around Rome. Then in 390 BCE, Rome nearly came to an end. A band of Gauls, a warlike people from the north, crushed a Roman army and surged into the city. Most of the Roman people fled into the countryside, and the Gauls looted the city and burned most of it down. With the city in ruins, the Romans considered fleeing to some other places, and instead they bravely decided to start over. They rebuilt their city and surrounded it with walls. They also built up their army, and before long, Roman soldiers were on the march again. During the 300s, Rome conquered the Etruscans and many neighboring tribes. To the south, they battled a people called the Samnites, as well as several Greek cities. And by 275 BCE, Rome's conquest of the Italian peninsula was complete. Rome now controlled the Italian peninsula, but Rome's expansion came at great cost. Romans had been fighting wars for 2 centuries, and the Gauls had once destroyed their city. As Roman territories grew, the city had to keep a large permanent army to defend it. and conquered lands. As a result, more and more Romans were forced to serve in the army. Most of the soldiers were plebeians, and this was a reason for the struggle between the plebeians and the patricians. Roman citizens were not the only ones who paid a cost for Rome's expansion. Rome allowed the people of some defeated cities to become Roman citizens, but other cities were not treated as well. Many received more limited privileges, such as the abilities to trade with Rome, and Roman allies had to pay Rome taxes and supplied soldiers for Roman armies. By 264 BCE, Rome had more citizens and well-trained soldiers than any other power in the Mediterranean world, but very soon the Romans would face their greatest challenge yet. During Rome's second period of expansion, it fought 3 savage wars with Carthage, a powerful city in North Africa, for control of the Mediterranean region. When the wars began, Carthage held North Africa, most of Spain, and part of Sicily. It also controlled most of the trade in the western Mediterranean. The Greek cities in southern Italy had frequently clashed with Carthage over trading rights. When Rome conquered their cities, it was drawn into the fight with Carthage. Rome's wars with Carthage are called the Punic Wars, after the Greek name for the people of Carthage. The First Punic War began in 264 BCE. It was fought mostly at sea. Carthage had a very powerful navy, but the Romans built up their own navy by copying and improving on the Carthaginian ship design. A decisive victory at sea in 241 BCE won the war for the Romans. The triumphant Romans took over Sicily as well as other islands. The Second Punic War started 3 years later. This time, the Carthage decided to attack Italy itself, and in 218, Hannibal, a brilliant Carthage general, surprised the Romans by marching his army across the Alps and into Italy. His troops rode elephants and braved snowstorms, landslides, and attacked by local tribes. For 15 years, Hannibal's men fought the Romans. In 202 BCE, Hannibal returned home to defend Carthage against a Roman army. There he was defeated in the battle that ended the Second Punic War. Carthage was forced to give Spain to Rome, along with a large sum of money. For about 50 years, there was peace between Rome and Carthage. Then, spurred on by Cato, a senator who demanded the destruction of Carthage, the Romans attacked once more. The Third Punic War lasted 3 years, and in 146 BCE, the Romans burned Carthage to the ground. They killed people and sold others into slavery. Rome was now the greatest power in the Mediterranean region. It controlled North Africa, much of Spain, Macedonia, and Greece. The Punic War expanded Roman power and territory, but Rome's victories came at a price. Families mourned for the soldiers who had died in the long wars. In addition, people living outside Rome suffered huge losses. Hannibal's army had destroyed thousands of farms, and other farms had been neglected, while farmers were off to fight in Rome's army. By the time the soldiers returned home, grain was flowing into Italy from Sicily and other places, and small farms were being replaced by large estates. Unable to compete with the wealthy landowners, many poor farmers had to sell their land. Although riches and slaves flowed into Rome from the conquered land, so did new customs. Many of the new ideas came from Greece. Wealthy Romans competed with one another to build Greek-style homes and beautiful temples. By 145 BCE, Roman conquest had brought great wealth to the city of Rome, but they also had put the republican form of government under strain, and by the end of Rome's third period of expansion, the republic had collapsed. Rome had also had to, as Romans conquered other lands, they brought hundreds of thousands of prisoners to Roman lands, and they turned them into slaves who labored on farms and in the city. Romans often treated their slaves very harshly. A slave named Spartacus led a famous revolt in 73 BCE. After crushing his army and killing Spartacus in battle, the Romans hung thousands of the surviving rebels on crosses. There was trouble in the city, too. With so many slaves to do the work, thousands of farmers and laborers had no job. They crowded into Rome, becoming a mob that an ambitious leader could turn into an army. Rome's army was producing many such leaders. Generals used their armies to gain fame in far-off lands and then fight for power in Rome. In one civil war of the 80s, 200,000 Romans were killed. 40 years later, another civil war broke out between two ambitious generals, Pompey and Julius Caesar. Pompey had expanded Roman rule in such eastern lands as Syria and the island of Cyprus. Caesar had conquered much of Gaul, and by 49, Pompey was back in Rome, while Caesar commanded an army to the north of Italy across the Rubicon River. Both men wanted to control Rome, but Pompey had the support of the Roman Senate. Urged on by Pompey, the Senate forbade Caesar from entering Italy with his army. Caesar disobeyed. On January 11th, 49, he crossed the Rubicon with his army, and after 3 years of fighting, he defeated Pompey. The frightened Senate named Caesar dictator for life. With Caesar in control, the republican form of government was at an end. As dictator, Julius Caesar introduced many reforms. He gave works to thousands of Romans by starting projects to make new roads and public buildings. To keep the poor happy, he staged gladiator contests they could watch for free. He also adopted a new calendar that is still used today. Caesar had a vision of Rome as a great empire. He started new colonies and granted citizenship to the people of the cities in Gaul and Spain, but he did not live to see his vision come true. On March 15th, 44 BCE, a group of enemies stabbed Caesar to death as he was entering the Senate. The plotters who killed Caesar thought they were saving the republic, but they were wrong. Instead, a true Roman emperor soon emerged to take Caesar's place. Caesar's murder plunged Rome into a series of civil wars that lasted more than 10 years, and when the fighting ended, one man stood out as the absolute ruler of Rome. He was Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son. So began the Roman Empire and Rome's fourth period of expansion. To gain power, Octavian had to defeat jealous rivals. One of them was Mark Antony, a popular general. Antony had married Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. In 31 BCE, Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra in a sea battle near Actium, Greece. His army chased the two to Egypt, where they killed themselves. Octavian was now the supreme ruler of the Mediterranean region. Octavian knew that the Roman prized their republic, and he told them he was restoring the authority of the Senate and the Roman people. But he was in complete control. The Senate gave him the title Augustus, which means revered. Historians call him Rome's first emperor. As a ruler of Rome, Augustus encouraged education, art, and literature. He completed grand construction projects, repairing more than 80 ruined temples. He also gave Rome the first police force, firefighter, and library. As emperor, Augustus ruled over 50 million people. He turned eastern kingdoms like Judea and Armenia into Roman provinces. To defend the empire, he pushed its border to natural boundaries, the Rhine and the Danube rivers to the north, and the Sahara Desert in the south, and the Atlantic Ocean in the west. The vast empire needed a strong economy, and the Romans improved trade routes by building harbors, canals, and roads. Goods flowed into Rome from throughout the empire and as far away as China. Roman coins made trade easier by providing a single system of currency. But Rome's final expansion brought new problems. The reformed Roman morals, Augustus harshly punished people for being unfaithful to their husbands or wives. To protect the emperor, he established a private army, the Praetorian Guard. In later years, the same guard sometimes murdered the emperors it was supposed to protect. Under Roman law, the Mediterranean world was mostly at peace for 200 years. This period is called the Pax Romana, but keeping the peace cost the Romans dearly. During Augustus's reign, one rebellion in the east took 3 years and 100,000 soldiers to put it down. Before it was over, a Roman army was completely destroyed. Later emperors added to the territory controlled by Rome. From Britain to the Red Sea, a single power ruled over the greatest empire the world has ever known. Defending this empire became increasingly challenging and costly as time went on.